From folklore and fairies
to monsters and mysteries, it came from the Maritimes. Wearing the chains she forged in life, my co-host, Chelsea.
Sneaking down your chimney, but not to deliver presents, my co-host, Evan.
Howdy, everyone. Welcome to It Came From The Maritimes, an Atlantic Canada folklore podcast.
We'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Blessed Yule, and Happy Holidays. We hope that everyone's holiday season, no matter how they celebrate, is exactly what they need it to be. Whether you're on your way to a family get-together while you listen to this, or you're sitting curled up under blankets by a fireplace, we hope that you get a chance to enjoy our story and that you have a fantastic holiday time. The tradition of sharing ghost stories at Christmas goes back centuries. One of the most famous Christmas spooky tales is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a story I'm sure we've all heard one way or another. Evan, what's your favorite version of A Christmas Carol?
That's tough. There's so many great ones. There's the Disney version with Scrooge McDuck.
Classic.
Muppets, of course. I think my favorite, and this might be a controversial pick, but there was an animated one, I think 2009-ish with Jim Carrey, I think.
Oh, I remember that
and
one.
And that one's pretty fun. I feel like it doesn't get the credit it deserves.
I feel like I'll need to add that one to the watch list for this year.
Yeah, how about you?
My personal favorite is The Muppets Christmas Carol. I've been watching it at least once a year since I was a child. And let me tell you, the movie, it's nonstop bops. Michael Caine gives the performance of a lifetime easily. He's a talented actor, but his best role by far. And there's something about Muppets. I love puppets. They're great.
Oh, yeah. I know there's actually a thing with that movie where apparently Michael Caine came in and said, I'm going to play this super seriously and just pretend there are no Muppets around me. So that's why he's always like just on.
That's it. He's giving the Muppets the respect they deserve.
Truly.
Now, ghost stories were traditionally told in the winter to help distract folks from the cold, dreary weather. It encouraged them to bundle up to stay warm and to hide from spirits. Today, we have two Nova Scotian ghost stories for you, sharing paranormal events that happened around Christmas time on the Eastern Shore. Our first story I read in Mysteries of Canada by Hammerson Peters. This story takes us back to 1944 to the home of the Hilchey family in Eastern Passage. On Christmas Eve, the Hilcheys and their children were gathered in the sitting room, maybe even sharing a ghost story of their own. They were cozy, full of delicious food, but all of a sudden, they heard 3 loud, hollow knocks coming from deep within their cottage. Mr. Hilchey got up to investigate, but was unable to find the source of the knock. He shrugged his shoulders, assuming he had just heard something from a neighboring home, and he sat back down to enjoy Christmas Eve with his family. Their peaceful Christmas did not last long. Over the following days, the random knocks continued, and in addition to these intrusive sounds, items started moving around the house. One day, Mrs. Hilchey and 3 of her children were sitting around the kitchen table, and the washing machine moved all the way across the floor and then spontaneously overturned. Pillows would fly down the stairs, even when no one was on the second story of the house, but soon it escalated to heavier objects, like boxes of soap or hammers being tossed around. The teenage daughter, Catherine, seemed to witness the majority of events, including an egg flying across the kitchen into the skillet when she stood in front of the stove. Even the local stray dog seemed aware of the poltergeist presence, and for the duration of these events, he would sit outside the Hilcheys' door, howling and barking.
That's interesting that the dog would stick around and almost try to warn them.
Well, that's just it. Try to get eyes on the situation.
Yeah.
Now, Mrs. Hilchey was at a loss, so she called the police and the local newspaper, the Mail Star, hoping for assistance in getting to the bottom of this paranormal activity. The police were unable to come to any conclusions, but when the newspaper reporters were there, they ended up witnessing firsthand multiple occurrences. One reporter saw a pair of scissors opening and closing on a shelf, and another saw the boiling kettle jump off the stove onto the floor. Both reporters saw a bowl of soup levitate off the kitchen table and tip onto Catherine's lap. They also witnessed an alarm clock fly off the dresser.
Jeez, that's a lot going on in a pretty short period of time for the reporters to be there.
I know, that's a busy poltergeist.
No kidding.
From that point forward, the poltergeist activity moved on from inanimate objects. Mrs. Hilchey was walking downstairs one night when she felt something grab the heel of her slipper. It happened again later that week, but this time she unfortunately couldn't catch herself, and she fell down the stairs and fractured her femur. Since the events had gotten so extreme, they called in a psychological researcher, Thomas L. Garrett, to investigate. He interviewed the parents and children, but had to pause partway through because the teapot flew off a hook in the kitchen and flew past the head of the teenage Catherine. The researchers started to think that the activities revolved around Catherine. He focused his questions on her and found out that she had been the only person to witness the apparition of a strange man with bushy hair staring at her through the kitchen window. Thomas L. Garrett thought that since Catherine was in her teenage years, she was more vulnerable to poltergeist activity, and his belief was that she was involuntarily projecting invisible psychic rods from her body in response to the stress. So essentially, these psychic rods were what were causing the knocks and the movement. Now, after a little while, the poltergeist activity did settle down as Catherine got older and got towards the end of her teenage years. The Christmas of 1945 was much quieter for the Hilty family of Eastern Passage. So what do you think of the Christmas ghost of Eastern Passage?
I mean, that's something. So in the end, it seems like the psychologist basically just blamed the teenager.
Yes, it seems to be the case with a lot of poltergeist incidents. It often seems to revolve around teenagers, especially teenage girls. And there's some people that suspect it's because of certain puberty things that are happening that cause this to occur. I don't know the exact scientific, parascientific reasoning behind it. But yeah, the teenage daughter.
I'd say the one other thing from this is more just a tangent that I'm about to go on, but I thought of something the other day and I looked up what qualifications do the Ghostbusters have? And all of them are PhDs in psychology and parapsychology. And that's their qualification to go out there with like these giant packs that like shoot out protons.
They're definitely vigilante-esque.
They really
folks.
are. I think that the EPA guy was right in Ghostbusters. They shouldn't be trusted with that much power.
Evan is dropping the topical takes today.
Oh yeah, Ghostbusters, the most topical. Actually, there was a new movie recently.
We're coming for you, Bill Murray.
We're coming for you, Bill Murray.
Now, our next story takes us down the road from Eastern Passage to a century-old home in Cow Bay. This story I read in Bill Jessome's Maritime Mysteries. It doesn't take place exactly on Christmas, but in December on a cold night leading up to the holiday season. One cold December night after the kids had gone to bed, a Mrs. Sharp was taking advantage of a few quiet moments to wrap Christmas gifts in her bedroom. The house was still, the type of quiet you only get on a dark winter's night. The only sounds were the snip of her scissors and the crinkle of wrapping paper. Suddenly, even though she was alone in the bedroom, the latch on her closet door lifted and the door slowly creaked open. Mrs. Sharp gasped and stood upright. She stood still in shock as the closet door continued to open wider and wider. Her dog had been resting on the floor behind her when he suddenly turned to look at the door, his fur standing on end. The dog hesitated for a mere moment before rushing out of the bedroom door and sprinting downstairs. So it's interesting that the dog in the first story was like trying to get in to help, whereas this dog was just like, nah, I'm good.
I was going to say, this one doesn't have loyalty because the other one was a stray in the neighborhood and it was trying to help.
That's it. This one not having it.
Yeah.
Mrs. Sharp looked on, terrified as the closet door started opening and shutting by itself repeatedly. It only stopped when she left the room. Over the following days, houseplants started tipping over. This was even witnessed by visitors to the home, who confirmed that no one was standing near the plant when it fell. Also, the stove handle fell off and spontaneously flew across the kitchen. The house would start to shake with no explanation, and the washboard on the wall exploded. The spirit itself was never seen, but once Mrs. Sharp caught a glimpse of a shadow passing in front of her window. Once in a while, the house will still shudder or a plant pot will quiver, the activity always seeming to worsen as those dark December days approach.
That's interesting. I mean, there's apparently kids, but there's no mention of a teenage girl, so
No.
who knows what's going on with this Mrs. Sharp. But
Well, that's it, because the activity seemed to be associated with her if when she left the door stopped.
yeah, exactly. That's interesting, though. Yeah.
It is. I know you're not super familiar with that area, but Cow Bay and Eastern Passage are literally just along the same
I've been
kind of
through.
stretch. Yeah, I had no idea. Evan, little Nova Scotia traveler.
I think I drove through bird watching one day.
Classic reason. That's how Evan has seen most of our province. Very.
That's true.
Now, to celebrate the Christmas season, my gift to Evan is a Christmas folklore quiz.
Oh, goody.
You're
Just
getting
what I
nothing
wanted.
else. No other presents for Evan this year, just this quiz, so it better be good. All right. Are you ready?
I am.
What is the name of the half-goat, half-demonic creature that is St. Nicholas's evil counterpart?
Is that Krampus?
It is. He's a figure from Central and Eastern European folklore who would punish naughty children with a birch rod or, in some cases, kidnap them.
You know, standard stuff.
That's it. Classic stuff. Now, Evan, what is mumming?
I was thinking about this the other day and I was going to look it up because I was like, I don't fully know, but isn't it? It's a thing in Newfoundland, right? Where they wear masks and it's almost like caroling.
Yeah, so essentially, they dress in disguises over the 12 days of Christmas and visit their neighbors, and their neighbors need to guess their identity and then give the people food and drink, which I'm all for mumming. It sounds like a great time. I have a lot of friends who partake. But I find it funny that the homeowners need to guess their identity and then give them food and drink. So it's like they need to do all the work and then give a prize.
I know. I've heard of something similar from Wales called Mary Lwyd or something. But
yes.
Welsh is, I'm not great at pronouncing anything in Welsh, but they have I believe, a horse skull.
Yes.
And I think that would be more terrifying.
I don't know. I have a picture of mummers here to show Evan. Would you open your door and offer them food and drink?
Here's the thing. I don't talk to my neighbors that much, so I just don't think I would have a fair guess.
Yeah, folks, I live in the country, so if anyone's knocking on my door, I can guarantee I'm just not going to answer it.
Yeah, I would assume that if someone's like that, I assume it's more of a purge situation.
Well, that's the thing. Now, whenever I see masks, I think of the movie The Purge, or even there's one, The Strangers. I'm not here for it. I don't do masks.
Fair enough.
But I respect everyone in Newfoundland who enjoys that practice. Now, our final question, this is probably the more random of them, but do you have any guesses as to what the folkloric origin of tinsel is?
I always assumed it was supposed to look like snow and ice on the trees and reflecting off of it, but I can't really say.
Yeah, so the idea of reflection is on point. So in Eastern Europe, there's the story of the Christmas spider. And essentially in this tale, there was a widow who managed to secure a tree for the Christmas season, but was unable to afford decorations. So the spider living in the home took pity because he saw how hard the widow had been working, and the spider ended up spinning a beautiful web that reflected when the light shone upon it and started looking sparkly and twinkly. So there's actually a tradition now where people have a spider ornament that they put on their tree to represent this.
That's neat. I'm not gonna put a spider on my tree, but it's neat.
I have one. It's gold and sparkly, and my cat tries to kill it. So it's not a great tree decoration, all things considered.
Fair enough.
Well, that's it. Thank you for indulging me.
Anytime.
And Merry Christmas, Evan.
Merry Christmas.
Now, we'd like to thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of It Came From The Maritimes. And since this is our last episode of 2024, we'd like to thank everyone for listening to our podcast this year. We've really enjoyed researching and sharing these stories, and we hope you love listening to them. We're going to take a bit of a break, so we won't have an episode next week. We'll be back in early January, and you can check out our social media in the meantime for your It Came From The Maritimes fix. So speaking of that, you can find us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at It Came From The Maritimes, on X at ICFT Maritimes, and you can always reach us by email at itcamefromthemaritimes@gmail.com if you have any Atlantic Canada folklore you'd like covered in future episodes. Also, if you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and a nice rating. It helps people find our podcast. Now, we're going to be ending our episode with a folklore tip, and I'm laughing because this one is a bit morbid, but hey, it's in Blue Nose Magic, so it's fair game. So Evan, do you have a folklore tip for us today?
I do. This week's folklore fact is a green Christmas means a full graveyard. So with that, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We wish everyone the absolute best.
I'm hoping you all a white Christmas.
That we are. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye.
Bye.